Given the reputation that he garnered over the years, the negative reputation and the isolationism, going against Roosevelt as a Democrat, how did he manage to position his children, Jack Kennedy, to be able to succeed in politics and become president, given his reputation?
I think that there is, first of all, nobody wanted to tar Jack or John Jr. with the same brush. John Jr., I'll be okay, Joe Jr. with the same brush. Had Joe Jr. lived, I don't believe he would have ever been the first Catholic president. He was a chip off the old block. There were stories that he was very violent towards women. He was certainly an anti-Semite. He thought that he was bigger than his father in many ways. The letters that he wrote that were anti-Roosevelt are shocking. So in many ways, there would not have been a Kennedy legacy had he lived, in my opinion. Okay, this all comes back to how did it all work? Jack, on the other hand, was the reader in the family. He had been very ill his entire life, very brave through that illness. He had Addison's disease, and it wasn't known until well after his death, and it wasn't treated until he was already an adult. But he understood history. He understood the history of Israel. He made a point of understanding why there was an Arab-Israeli conflict. He understood why Europe could not allow Hitler to be Hitler, what Mussolini was getting wrong. And he wrote about all of this privately. And what's so interesting is when the war came to America, he's not taking advice from Joe Jr., Joe Kennedy. He's taking advice from Jack. And Jack is telling him to temper his rhetoric, to please stop doing what you're doing. Jack is trying to make him into a diplomat, which is like taking a horse and turning it into Cinderella. Okay. So essentially, though, there were a lot of people like J. Edgar Hoover, like the Democratic Party, that liked the look of the Kennedys. They were handsome. In the words of Maria Riva, who was Marlene Dietrich's daughter, they could all do advertising for toothpaste companies. They were wonderful, the Kennedy children, and they were wonderful. Why they were wonderful is a whole other story, but they were wonderful in their own way. They were very special. And I think Jack was able to shine once Joe Jr. died. And of course, he died in 1944 as the first drone pilot. Within a minute of takeoff, the plane exploded.